Thank you. So I grew up
We
in
can
this.
hear you, boss. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah? Okay. So I grew up in this really small town in southeastern Colorado, and that's the population as of the 2013 census. And I graduated with 33 people, and I was 19th in the class. And my parents owned a nursing home, and I knew from a really, really young age that we are definitely all going to die. And the older I get, the more I realize what a privilege it is to die when we're old, and that we really have an opportunity to do something every day right now while we're here. And now I'm the CEO of Simon Sinek's company, Start With Why. And he and I started in his living room in 2009. And he had this vision of a world where the vast majority of people would wake up inspired to go to work and feel safe when they're there and come home at the end of the day fulfilled by the work that they do. And I really wanted to help him build that. And in 2013, our team looked something like this. And last year we looked like this, and now we're at about 20 people. And if you were to ask me how I got here, I would probably respond how like most of you would say how you got here. I don't know, I fell uphill, I got lucky, stuff happened. And when Charlie and Megan asked me to speak, they've been trying to get me to speak for a while, and I've been like, what would I speak about? I could get you the guy who did the third most watched TED Talk of all time. Why do you want me? And they were saying, well, you know, you're a builder. Haven't you learned something you could share with the team in what you've been building and what you've learned in your life? And I started to kind of make a list of some lessons or some things that I had learned and couldn't really put any sense to it. But one theme that I saw is that there's this growth mindset, I think, in any of us, this willingness or desire or knowing that in order to reach where we want to go, we're going to have to grow. And if we have that mindset, we're more likely to do more, to achieve more. And it wasn't until last weekend I was at this entrepreneurs event. Do any of you know who India Ari is? She's like an artist and a singer. And she was at this event, and she did this thing called Songversation. And her songs were like the backdrop of my college years. And in this Songversation, she told all these stories about her life and then sung the songs in relationship to that. And she kind of used these 5 stages of growth: break through, break down, break the shell, elevate, and fly, as this kind of growth cycle. And it really, really resonated with me. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try and use this framework to communicate some things that I've learned with you guys. So I'm going to try to tell a couple stories to help define what these terms mean in this cycle. So the day that I learned my why was a really, really awesome day. It was 2009. I just started working with Simon, and he and I set the entire day aside, and he asked me all these questions about myself, and we connected all the dots on all these stories of who I was on my best day. And at the end of the day, I kind of had this recipe in my hand that was my why statement and how I best did my work. It was a total breakthrough. It just allowed me to see something that I had never, in a way that I had never seen it before. It was just really, really powerful. And about 6 months later is when I started to, I would say, grasp the corner of the edge of understanding what it might mean to actually live my why every day. So I want to tell you that story. And to set the stage, I live in a building in Brooklyn that's very much a community. And so we kind of have this huge group of friends that lives in this one building. And it's actually how I met my boyfriend. And at the time, we had been together for about a year. And an ex-neighbor was coming back to visit. And everyone was really excited. They were planning a barbecue. She'd been back at home in Switzerland, and she was coming back to visit. We were planning this barbecue, getting together. And I was lackluster at best. And the reason that I was lackluster at best was because she and my boyfriend, prior to us getting together, had had a very close relationship, let's say. And I knew exactly how this was going to play out. I knew exactly how it was going to play out. she was going to show up on the roof with a dress that was a little too short, and she was going to hug him a little too long, and the wind was going to blow her blonde hair, and she was going to use her Swiss accent, and she was going to, like, you know, tell everyone what she'd been doing for the last year, and everyone was going to be standing around enamored with her, and I was going to be sitting in the corner angry, wishing the wind would blow her off the roof. And I played this scenario over and over again in my mind until we got to the big day, and we're all on the roof, and the sun's setting, and in she walks. And sure enough, she's in that dress, and the wind's blowing, and the hair's waving. First thing she does, V-line for him, leap into his arms, you know, like the laugh and the leg throw. And then she turns around with her little Swiss accent and starts telling everyone about what amazing year she's had. And though I'm not sitting in the corner, I'm standing in the crowd acting like I actually care. I'm wishing the wind would blow her off the roof. And as the evening goes on, I have a glass of wine, and I sit down with my friends, and I get to talking, and it occurs to me I have not checked on Little Miss Swiss in a while. I better identify where she is. And I look over here, and I see him. She's not there. Whew. Observe, squinting into the darkness. She's sitting over here with a friend, and she looks kind of disheveled, and she's not looking so good. And I'm thinking, like, Karma's a bitch. Have a little too much to drink, get yourself a little disheveled. And I went right back to my conversation with my friend. And in this moment, I heard this little voice in my head that said, she's not reveling in who she is. Because you see, my why is to support and encourage others to revel in who they are. And revel for me means at the edge of your greatness. It means everything that you are, you bring it to the table. And that girl did not have that going on. And though I tried to kind of ignore it and stay in the conversation with my friends, it became really clear to me that I had to get up and do something. And as I'm walking over to her, I'm hearing, red alert, Mayday, abort mission, walk away from enemy, do not approach her. But my feet keep moving in that direction. And before I know it, I'm standing in front of her, and I go, "Are you okay?" And she, in her cute little accent, looks up, and it turns out she's not totally shit-faced. She just actually has a piece of glass stuck in her foot, and she could use some help. I'm like, "I'll take you downstairs and help you." And the scene that ensues is her sitting on the toilet and me on the floor with a whole array of utensils for 45 minutes trying to dig this piece of glass out of her foot. And when I finally get it in the tweezers, I'm holding it up like this, I realize that I have completely fallen in love with her. So here's us, the three of us together. And I cannot imagine what my life would be like if she wasn't one of our friends. And what I really learned was who you are in your worst day is who you really are. And closing the gap between your worst day and your best day is the hard work that needs to be done. When your worst day is your best day, that's what flying is all about. So fast forward about 3 years from the day I, again, kind of think I might have an inkling of an understanding of what it means to live your why in every day. A lot harder than I originally thought at the breakthrough moment. We met Charlie and Megan, and we came in to do a why discovery for Next Jump. And after a few conversations and engaging and doing some work for you, they looked up at me, and I think they had noticed a little bit of tension, because you see, I was in a perpetual state of worst days at that time. And who I was being in those worst days was far from reveling. And they somehow picked up on that. I know that's shocking to you guys. And they said, "Hey, listen, we know you got a lot on your plate. If you want to come in and talk about it, we'd love to see if we can help you, because we love the work that you're doing." And I came in for my first kind of coaching session, and Charlie goes, "So paint me a picture of what's going on." I said, "All right. Well, At the time, Simon was about 6 months behind on his book deadline for Leaders Eat Last. He was completely inundated with trying to get this book finished, which was much more difficult than we originally thought it was going to be. Our business was scaling. We had more demand than we had had the year previously. I was flailing, completely flailing. And as the story unfolded to Charlie, it was really like, Simon's not showing up. Simon's not doing what I ask him to do. I'm all by myself. Everything that I try to do, all this stuff that I do right, he points out only the things that I do wrong. He never shows up except to point his finger when there's something he doesn't like. I'm completely exhausted. I can't go on anymore. Won't he miss me when I'm not here? That was the story. And if I were to show you a visual, it would look something like this. And just to be clear, this is me. I'm sweet and innocent, and that's Simon the monster. That's exactly what I painted for Charlie. And Charlie said, listen, good news is I think I can help you with this. And I was like, awesome. And then he was like, but we're going to have one rule. You're not going to use the name Simon moving forward. I was like, awesome. He's like, all right, so let's look at the problems you've identified here. I was like, how can we not look at the problem when Simon's clearly my problem? I have to say the S word. I can't get through this conversation without it. And he said, okay, well, I think maybe there's a narrative here that's not serving you. And we kind of started writing out something that looked like this. And I was like, yeah, I'm all alone in this, and no one's helping me, and I'm doing everything here, right? This was the story. And honestly, you would need a magnifying glass if I had put probably every piece of my narrative in here. This is 1/16 of probably what was written down that day. It was a very, very serious narrative that I was committed to. And Charlie's like, all right, we got the narrative. I don't think we're ready to do anything else with this. Why don't you just sit with this narrative for a little while and add to it and see what you learn. So I ended up having dinner with a friend about a week later, and I was telling her about my narrative. And I was saying, I know this isn't serving me, but I'm so pissed off, and I don't know what else to do, and this is really how I feel. And that shit is true. That's just the truth. That's what's going on here. And she said, hey, do you know that children's book, The Little Red Hen? And I'm like, yeah, why? She's like, well, it sounds exactly like the story you're telling me. So to refresh your memory, if you guys do not remember this children's book, she planted the seed, she cut the wheat, she gathered the wheat, she carried the wheat to the mill to be ground, she carried the flour home, she made the bread, and though nobody helped her, they all showed up to eat it. And I went like, yeah, that's me, that's my story, that happens to me all the time. And she said, Kim, if you do not tame this monster, you're just gonna leave this job and you're gonna go to another job and the exact same thing's gonna happen. She said, because how you do one thing is how you do all things. And I was like, what? And she was like, how you do one thing is how you do all things. I guarantee you that Little Red Hen narrative is playing out in other aspects of your life. And that really made me angry because I already couldn't handle the one monster, and the idea that there were all sorts of other monsters in my closet was really upsetting. And exploring this narrative in other parts of my life just didn't sound that fun and or interesting. But it's kind of, once that seed is planted, you cannot help but go there, particularly if you have a growth mindset. And so I did, and it turns out I had a whole cast of characters from my past, from my family, from my old bosses. This was definitely not the only monster that I was carrying this narrative that the whole world is on my shoulders and everything's up to me and I'm all alone and I have to do it and so on and so forth. And I literally could put a name to every single one of these monsters, but I'll spare you. And it seemed like the challenge of what to do next was to write a different narrative. And I really focused on, with my work with Charlie and with some other coaches, on focusing on my work because I'm so passionate about my work and the work that I do with Simon. And so I really wrote a new narrative, and I won't take you through this whole thing, but the big thing is my legacy is my responsibility. The work that I am going to do, the work that I was meant to do, is on me. And really, for me, a big aha was that I have a commitment to help as many people revel as possible. And if I think that Simon and his message and his platform will help me do that, It's no longer about Simon, it's about his body of work. And I embody his work. I don't need permission to act, to do every single thing that needs to get done. So shifting into this new narrative really shifted the way I felt about my monster. And the question is, how do we get from being completely victimized to taming our own monster? And I'm not going to pretend to have mastered this. As a matter of fact, I was just walking down the street last night talking to Layla, my assistant, on the phone about something. And after I got done saying it, I said, "Did you just hear the narrative of the little red hen?" And she started laughing because it was there last night in a phone call. She's around still in my life at certain times. But I'm going to hopefully share some things with you guys that will be helpful, and we'll hopefully learn from you guys after of some things that you know too. So I hope a takeaway from this is that Simon was not the monster. Simon was a trigger to a narrative of a history of monsters that existed long before he came, and he just became the next monster in the string of my own narrative. And this is a picture of us from last year at our offsite. So I'm going to use India Ari's thoroughly unscientific grow cycle to try to unpack this a little bit. So breakthrough. Breakthrough is all about seeing something in the future, having this clarity, right? It's a perception shift. It's that moment when nothing's changed but everything's different. And the reason breakdown is inevitable after breakthrough is because this clarity of where we need to go, we can't get there with our old narrative, with our old skills, with our old baggage, or just lack of experience on how to move forward. A breakdown is inevitable after a breakthrough, if it is a true breakthrough. And the breakthrough is such an opportunity to practice who we are in our worst day, because the breakdown is where things get really crappy, and this is where you get to flex and exercise the muscle of being the best version of yourself when you can't control what's happening around you. And I use a couple of things, a couple of thoughts around breakdown that help me a lot. One is the only way out is in. Get in as fast as you can. When breakdown is coming, get into the breakdown, because once you get in, you can get out the other side. And that this is going to be as hard or as easy as I make it. I have never really been through a breakdown that was easy, but it can certainly be a lot harder and less hard if you know you can get through it more quickly with your mindset. And how do you know that you're about to hit a breakdown? There's a number one sign for me, and I don't know if it's the same for everyone, but for me, every single time, I know exactly what it is. I get triggered. Someone usually says something to me that pisses me off. It makes me irrationally angry. And we have a saying on our team, if it triggers you, it's probably true. I would say if it triggers you, it is true. But we leave probably in there, because what happens after you get triggered is you have to just fly into a state of anger and denial. And it's more powerful if you can wrestle with the probably part and then on your own decide it is actually true. There's something about that for me that's helpful. And how do you know that you're in this denial and anger state? Something a term you guys are really familiar with: lying, faking, and hiding. That is a sure sign that you are in the midst of this breakdown. No, everything's fine. It didn't hurt my feelings. It's not what she said, it's the way she said it that really made me angry. It's not what she said. I'm not mad about that. That probably wasn't even true. Her tone of voice just really pissed me off, right? It's just this whole narrative that starts unfolding. And the opportunity here in this moment when you're angry is to put pen to paper. Write it out. Write out exactly what you think in the moment about that person, about that thing, and it will come to how you feel. Talk all about them until you can get to a point where you're talking about yourself. Get the narrative on the paper. Because as soon as it's on the paper, you can hold it in your hand and you can walk around it, and then you know what's coming next. You could go find your own cast of characters. Where else, in small and big ways, is this playing out in my life? Because how you do one thing is how you do all things. It is playing out in other places. I guarantee it. I have yet to find a strong narrative that was not playing out somewhere else in my life. And sometimes it's easier to start even addressing it in another place rather than the big place. You could practice in a less vulnerable place to wrap your head around the narrative. And I think most people are familiar with this kind of 5 stages of grief thing, but I think it's really something you have to go through to tame the monster. And the faster that you can run through this narrative from this place of just totally being in a place of fear to being in a place where you're coming from the best version of yourself is where you want to be. And this kind of like all gets mixed up, denial, anger, bargaining, it kind of goes in lots of different directions. And then you get to this point where you are just totally like, I suck. I'm the worst CEO ever. How did I even get this job? I don't even want this job. I don't even want to do this anymore. Nobody wants me to do this. No one believes I can do it. And when it goes from like, I suck, to like, I suck. I suck. Okay. I'm really not good here, but I'm really clear on where I want to go, and I'm really clear on where I am right now. And I'm willing to make a commitment to figure out how I'm going to close the gap here. And acceptance is where the magic begins, because the truth sets you free. And you guys know what I'm talking about. There's this moment where someone will tell you something that makes you really angry, and then you get on the other side of it and they tell you again, and you feel like it's actually like making you better. So I think the breakdown is like where the world is coming in on you. It's delivering a message, delivering a message, delivering a message, re-delivering a message until you get that message. And breaking the shell is all about coming from the inside out. It's, I know my new narrative. I believe my new narrative. I am my new narrative. It's 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, but I'm willing to continue to take the steps because I am not going back under any circumstance to where I was. I am moving forward. And break the shell is where the best version of you, the real version of you, starts to emerge. And it's really important because this is running up the mountain. Elevate is standing at the edge of the cliff with the wind, where you're leaning into the wind and you're putting your arms out and you're like leaning into that fear. You're running toward the tension. And it takes courage. This piece takes so much courage. I'm in it right now. I have never stood in front of a room and done this before. I was like, like cold sweating upstairs where you're like, I'm sweating and I'm nervous and my teeth hurt and I totally don't want to do this. And even though I know I'm in the nest and I'm at Next Jump and these people do this all the time, I do not want to do this. But this is Elevate. This is leaning into the fear. This is your legs are shaking. This is your narrative is saying, red alert, don't do it. But you keep moving your feet anyway because that is the only way that you will ever fly. And isn't that what this is all about? What this life is all about? Is spreading your wings and jumping off the cliff and flying, because we will die. Every single one of us. And in those last couple breaths, when our life is flashing before our eyes, do we not want to see ourselves and those around us in flight? And when you're on that cliff and you're leaning on the edge and you're thinking go or don't go, just ask yourself, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? If I wasn't afraid, I would just go. So what I really want to leave you guys with today is that when you write the narrative, you're the author. And when you're the author, it's your story. And when it's your story, the power's in your hands. So thank you guys for giving me an opportunity to be here and share with you guys today. I really appreciate it.
Do you want to take questions?
Sure.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. You
guys have any questions for Ken?
Kim, I'm curious. Obviously, the process is not even that depression, or the denial moving to acceptance is not a straight line. You go backwards, you go again. Can you walk us through maybe this journey? You're still going through it, but maybe some of the backwards parts you can remember before you went forward again?
Yeah.
'Cause it sort of makes it real for everyone.
Yeah. So it is I mean, you're in one of these or all of these things, I think all the time, right? The cycle itself is sorry. No, that's okay. Even from breakthrough to fly, I mean, you're flying in one place and you're, totally flailing in another place. I mean, this is a cycle of growth. Happens in lots of different things. I think, yeah, this is messy. This is messy. I think there are a couple of things. A, laughing at messy, right? So sometimes you think you've totally tackled a narrative. Like I said, I have been wrestling with Little Red Hen for 4 years now. And like I said, last night in a little way, just in what I said to Layla, I was like, the irony, right? And then I moved into, for 1 second, you're a complete loser. You just said to your assistant something about Little Red Hen, and now you're going to get up in front of a room and talk about Little Red Hen, right? It's this constant thing. But I think it's you get better and better at moving through this more quickly. And when you're not so scared of denial anymore, denial becomes an opportunity to write your narrative. And you don't have to bargain for so long. You don't have to be like, oh, you know what? I heard what Charlie said. I'm going to inherently just agree with him right now just so I can hopefully get past this, but I don't necessarily really believe it because I'm still kind of in denial, and therefore I'm not going to deal with the truth of something even though I know it sets me free. But when I'm here, I try to go like, is it possible that 1/10 of what he's saying is potentially true? Because for me, I know if it makes me angry, if it triggers me, it's true, because people say lots of things to me all the time. I got a team of 20 people who are constantly giving me feedback. And, if it doesn't make me angry, even if it is difficult feedback, then I've either dealt with it in some way, and I know and I'm aware of it, and then I'm in that point where it's really helpful. I'm in break the shell. And I'm like, oh man, I know, I'm dealing with that. I need to keep working on that, right? It doesn't make me angry. It's like, it's suddenly really helpful. Whereas it would have been a real trigger to me before if I hadn't really embraced the truth of where I was. So if I'm angry, what I'm doing in these stages is really just trying to figure out, where's the truth? Where's the truth? Where's the truth? Because it's making me so mad. It has to be true. It has to be true. I'm in such a state. I'm so triggered by this person and what this person is saying over and over again. And you know how it is. You're playing it through in your mind. It happened, but you're still playing it through in your mind 6 days later, 8 days later, and you're like avoiding that person and whatnot. I don't know if I'm really answering your question, Charlie, but I am saying I think it's really, really messy. And just to know what your signs are in every single one of these so that you can move yourself quickly into the next phase. And sometimes you move too quickly and you're like, I've accepted it, I've totally accepted it, I'm fully in acceptance, but you're not. And then you find yourself back here, with the bargaining chip.
I love your I suck to I suck.
Yes.
I see a lot of people go from I suck, and then someone around them convinces them they don't. And so they go backwards.
Yeah.
before They really go to
Yeah.
acceptance.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that's also where you start. I didn't really address this at all, but I think you get really good at this. I will tell you, like, particularly, I think in the last 6 years of my life, the people around me have changed. I have a lot more people around me that have a growth mindset. And I actually will get upset with someone if I'm in this state, where it happened to me last night, actually. I was talking to Hagai, my other half, and I was telling him about how I was feeling, and what I was to talk about. And he was kind of saying like, oh, you're going to be great or whatnot. And it kind of, I felt him coddling me, and it made me actually upset. Whereas there was a time when I would have only wanted to go to people who coddle me. And what I really wanted him to do was push me just a little bit more, right, to the edge of my greatness. So I think I have this has happened over time, but the people that I surround myself, or the people who are my lifeline, who I call, are the people who are not going to let me go back, Charlie. Like, I wouldn't call you if I thought you were going to let me go back. I would call you because I know you're going to push me to this place.
And because you've seen it, you recognize
Yeah.
it feels like when
And I don't know, like, I can't tell you the moment when it happened, but I can tell you, I can think of people in my life who I'm just like, no way, I'm not going to call that person. I would never call this person in this moment. I'm going to call the person who's going to push me to the next place where I need to go. Even if I cry, even if I snot cry, they're going to push me to the next place because I'm supposed to be flying and I'm not there yet. I got to keep going. Yeah, snot crying is like I've also learned is like a really important part of this for me. And everyone's not criers, but I'm definitely a crier. I have 2 Kleenexes in my pocket because I thought for sure I was going to be crying up here at least twice. And because I was crying when I was practicing also in my mind. When I was practicing in my mind, I was crying because I was so scared about doing this today. So I've learned to embrace that as a good part, a sure sign of the process that I'm headed in the right way.
Can I just comment maybe something or question, comment?
So this was awesome. Thank you. Eerily, creepily, we just went through a little version of this like 20 minutes before coming down here. So I'm just thinking about how like this natural process, like if it triggers you, it's probably true. Charlie definitely triggered something that was definitely true, but it was in my mind. I was like, probably, but like, you're defending it,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm defending that's not how I feel.
Yeah.
And he started writing, you said, write it down. I think that's actually a really critical piece. Write down the narrative, right? Because he started writing down what I was saying. And then I look, so now it's like documented or something.
Yes.
Something about it's like documented.
Yeah.
That's actually what I said. It was like such a powerful, because anyway, so I think that's
And
like
if
so
you take what you
interesting.
said and you go one step further to what you meant, because what you said is not what you meant.
Isn't what you say what you mean?
You would hope. But usually in this state of triggered, what I find is what you say and what you mean are not exactly the same thing. Because what you mean is like that you filtered 16 times before that came out of your mouth. Maybe not you and Charlie, but in
No,
most
that's not
cases.
filtered.
So, really, if it really also going from, okay, this is what I said, but what did I really mean?
Okay.
Because what you really meant is the real narrative, right? Is the shortest version of the narrative of I am all alone and everything is on my shoulders, right?
Yeah. Sorry, it's like so fresh. I'm still wrestling with it. a little bit. It's very fresh. Okay. Vinny, yep. Yours?
Quick question. So, since you were the little girl and there was a big monster, but now being CEO of 20, and you have to give that feedback downwards, do you find it difficult? Do you find that your natural inclination is to do the coddling because you were I don't want to say victim, but you were the little girl in that scenario. Now you're not the monster, but how do you sort of fight that like conflict internally that you as Kim, the person, wants to coddle, but now as the CEO, you have to like force it through the stages. So how do you handle that?
It's a good question. We have at 20, we have a culture that has a lot of tolerance for this type of conversation just because we are still so small. It might be difficult to have, I think, that much of an intimate relationship with everyone as we get larger, but I think right now we've kind of figured that out. We have a rule, which is, well, A, no lying, faking, hiding, which we totally stole from Megan's speech. And the day I heard it, I was like, rule implementing. So that means if you see someone lying, faking, hiding, sourced from your why, right? So if I'm coming to talk to you, and it's my responsibility to be in a place where I'm not triggered and I'm not angry at you, but I'm coming from a place of wanting you to revel in who you are, And so I owe it to you to tell you what I see, feel, and know in order to help you do that. And so, and a lot of times I'll start the sentence with that. Like, hey, I know I know that didn't go like you thought it was going to go. Or it seems like you're feeling really confident about this, but I'm concerned you're not going to be reveling in who you are if you go about it this way. And so here's what I need to tell you. So I used to be a really, again, like 5 or 6 years ago, I think coddling was like the norm for me. And now I probably am at the edge of, where I'll be like, I call it like hold the space. Should I just be holding the space or should I just get in here? Because growth takes time. So sometimes my job is just to hold the space, to say, yeah, man, you're in the shit. And I believe in you and I see you and you will figure it out. But sometimes I got to go in there and I got to say, I'm not sure you see what's really going on. I see a monster, and by the way, I see more than one monster. I've seen this play out in more than one place, and let me give you a specific example to help you. And sometimes I'm the trigger. And when that person gets angry, sometimes I have to be okay with that. I'm not going to be able to push them to the next step because I'm the monster. And I've got to trust that they're going to go call the next person that's hopefully going to push them into the next thing and move through it. And usually we get to the next conversation, and I don't think we've had anyone run out the door because I'm the monster yet. But yeah, so it's tricky. But just sourcing myself from what I want to do in the world, I think allows people to, it gives me room to deliver the message, and it allows people to hear it knowing where I'm coming from anyway. Whether they think I'm right or whether they think I'm wrong, they know I'm coming from a place of wanting them to move to the edge of their greatness.
Anybody in Boston or is London there? I'm not sure. Abe, I think, are you the only one in Boston? I'm not sure if you have a question. Are there more people? We just can't see them. We just can't see them. But he just went through your course, right? I know PLB actually, so.
We're already in Boston, no questions.
Yeah.
The whole rewriting of like the narrative piece. So can you just walk through that process a little bit? Because I feel like if you're in like this depression mode, if you're feeling like bad about yourself, to like have to rewrite that, like, do you, like, what's the process around that?
So, well, time and space. So you'll notice even in my story, the first time in doing this, writing one narrative doesn't mean you turn around and write the other one, right? It just means sometimes you wrestle in that narrative. You build that narrative out a little bit, and you're like, no, this is what I mean. No, this is what I mean. No, this is what I mean. I actually believe that, right? And for me, the little red hen, like tying it to that character in that children's book, it actually, in the actual children's book, everyone shows up to eat and she doesn't let them eat it. She's like, no, I made it myself. I don't actually know what the moral of the story, that I have to reread the book. I was like, no, she doesn't share it. She's like a total martyr, and then she still doesn't, I don't get it. But that narrative, that character has helped me a lot, because when I hear her clucking, I say hilariously, I know what to do with her now. Like, I laugh at her. And like I did yesterday, right? I was just like, Layla, did you just hear the little red hen and what I said? And she started laughing and I started laughing and she just went away. But again, that's 4 years of like, she was probably showing up 16 times a day at the time. Now she shows up, a couple times a month and rears her little whatever. This is a bad metaphor. This is going nowhere. But anyway, I think as you're moving through this, you could be aspirational about it at first. You could say, I wish it was like this. I wish I felt this way. Because the thing is like, to a point of tears, I love Simon. Even in that moment. Even though I was like, I'm going to leave and I'm resentful and whatever. Like, he was not being malicious. He was not doing it on purpose. Actually, he would say like he had no idea a lot of that was going on because he was so far down his like rabbit hole of what he was doing. He would say he had no idea any of that was going on. He would also say that he wishes that he, had showed up differently or he had better tools. I mean, it was not a good time for him either. But he will also say that I was impossible to deal with. I was impossible to deal with. He couldn't do anything right. He could have bought me like a chest of jewels, and I would have been like, oh, now you're bringing me jewels? You know, there was no way in my state with that narrative he was going to do anything that was going to fix it, because it was my narrative and it was my problem, and it was something that I had to deal with. So it is that he didn't, moving through that time, he didn't do anything inherently different. The only thing changed was me and my perception and my commitment and what I decided to do. And I think this is the same for any of us if we're willing to move into being the narrator. And it takes practice. And you can do it with little things. And the narrative is playing out everywhere all the time. We picked up the narrative, little pieces of the narrative. We picked them up since we were 3-year-old, and we've bought it, you know. It's like somebody's buying and somebody's selling all the time. And when we're kids, we're just like buying and putting shit in our pockets, you know. And that's where we define our, you know, our self-worth and how we feel about ourselves and what we'll do. We don't even realize that narrative is playing because it's so normal. It's the only narrative that's been playing. And so it could be difficult to capture. It could take lots of rounds of really figuring out what it looks like. I'm making it look like really simple and really like formulaic, but it is a lot of 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, where you're like, it's like layers of an onion. You're like, how did I end up here again? Oh, this sign, it's like you're driving around and you keep seeing like the same house. That's all we're doing all the time, is driving in a circle and looking at the same house. And it's really in that break the shell where you get to that same corner and you decide to turn right instead of turn left. And after you get 2 or 3 blocks, you start to get the confidence where you go, I am just not going back to that house. I'm just going to keep seeing what's out there. That's where the courage takes place. And ideally, you want to be surrounded with people that when you're like, ooh, I'm scared, I don't know what's on the next block, they're going like, just take another step, or I've been to that block. Trust me, I've been to that block. It's safe. I know it sounds scary to you, but it's a safe block. I know it doesn't look safe, but keep going. And so those people surrounding you are the vital point, especially when you hit break the shell, because it's so vulnerable and it takes so much courage and it's so far out of your comfort zone that to keep running is hard. Thanks, guys.